Today let's deal with the poem After Blenheim. After Blenheim, the poem is written by Robert Sade and it is set in a rural countryside, Bavaria. It's about the famous Battle of Blenheim fought between the English and French troops. So let's go into the poem. It was a summer evening. Old Kaspar's work was done, and he before his cottage door was sitting in the sun, and by him spouted on the green his little grandchild Wilhelmine. So here we see that old Kaspar is a peasant. His work has been done. He has gone to the field and come back. He is sitting now in the evening sun and he is enjoying the garden, and on that green, spouted on the green, the word spouted means was playing on that green countryside was his little granddaughter called Wilhelmine. She saw her brother Peterkin roll something large and round, which he beside the rivulet in playing there had found. So her little brother Peterkin, he was playing near the rivulet. The rivulet is a stream, the flow of water is there, and this child is playing. And there in that sand, he has found something that is large and round, and he has brought it. He came to ask what he had found that was so large and smooth and round. So the object is round, smooth, and so large. So this little child, he is astonished. He does not know what it is. He is bringing it to his grandfather to ask him, what is this? Old Kaspar took it from the boy, who stood expectant by, and then the old man shook his head, and with a natural sigh, "'Tis some poor fellow's skull," said he, "who fell in the great victory." So, looking at this object, the grandfather is telling the grandchild is standing expectant by. The word expectant tells us that he is looking out with so much of excitement, expecting an answer, a story from his grandfather, and that is what he is waiting. And the grandfather says he has a sigh, he has a natural sigh, which means that this is something sad. He says, "It is some poor fellow's skull, and that man has fallen in the great victory. I find them in the garden, and there's many here about, and often when I go to plough, the ploughshare turns them out." So the grandfather says that this is the skull of a person who has fallen. That is, there has been a battle and there has been a great victory. And this is the skull of some poor soldier who has been killed there. He then tells the children that I get to see many of these skulls when my ploughshare turns them out. The ploughshare is the iron part of the plough, that is the blade that is cutting through the field, and it is bringing out this skull, which is the bodies that are buried in that soil. The bones are being brought out by the ploughshare. "For many thousand men," said he, "were slain in that great victory." So many thousand people were killed in that war. "Now tell us what it was all about." Young Peterkin, he cries, and little Wilhelmine looks up with wonder-waiting eyes. "Now tell us about the war and what they fought each other for." So now when Peterkin is asking, what is this war about? Who has fallen in this great victory? Little Wilhelmine is also now, her curiosity is also aroused, and she too looks up with wonder-waiting eyes. Her eyes are full of wonder. How come the skull has come here? What is the story behind it? She too wants to know. "So it was the English," Kaspar cried, "who put the French to rout. But what they fought each other for, I could not well make out. But everybody said," quoth he, "it was a famous victory." So now here we see that old Kaspar, he does not remember what the war is about. He does not know what the war was about. All that he knows is that it was the English army that has uh, won the victory over the French army and has chased them out. But he remembers that it was a very famous victory. My father lived at Blenheim then, yon little stream hard by. They burnt his dwelling to the ground, and he was forced to fly. So with his wife and child he fled, nor had he where to rest his head. So now we see that old Kaspar is talking about his own father. His father had lived in a small dwelling by that river with his wife and child, and that house, their dwelling, was erased to the ground because the army had come in, they had burnt all the houses around, and this man and his wife and child were chased out of their dwelling. They did not have a place to go to. With fire and sword the country round was wasted far and wide, and many a childing mother then and newborn baby died. But things like that, must be at every famous victory. So now Kaspar is telling what all happened during the war. He says that many young mothers, pregnant women died. Many little children, their lives too were sacrificed in this war. The whole land was burnt and wasted. Dwellings were erased. But then Kaspar says in a matter-of-fact way that these things will happen. That is how war works out. These are the effects of war. And every famous victory will have all this. They say it was a shocking sight after the field was won, for many thousand bodies here lay rotting in the sun. But things like that, must be after a famous victory. So again he says that many people, the soldiers, their bodies lay rotting. So many young men, they were killed in this war. But all these things, again he repeats, these are things that will happen in any famous victory. So this war was between the French and the English. Here the English, in the year 1704, John Churchill, the Duke of Marlborough, along with Eugene of France, they drove out the French troops and they took out Bavaria from the war with this victory, that is the victory of Blenheim. So this war is what the poet is writing about here. Great praise the Duke of Marlborough won, and our good Prince Eugene. Why? It was a very wicked thing, said little Wilhelmine. Nay, nay, my little girl, quoth he, it was a famous victory. Now here we see that little Wilhelmine, she says, it was a very wicked thing. But old Kaspar is telling her, no, little girl, it was a famous victory. So now what is actually war? War is always romanticized. War is described as something patriotic, as a great and heroic thing. But stripped of all these concepts, stripped of all these ideals, what is war? War is simply plunder and murder. That is what happens in a real war. People are killed for no apparent reason. This earth that belongs to every human and every creature in it is laid to waste by the selfishness and greed of people. And so we see here the little girl, she is calling it by its actual name. She is a little child, and children, they are not going to abide by the laws or rules made by society. They question what is wrong. And her little mind, her little conscience is troubled. And she says, it is a very wicked thing to harm your brothers. It is a wicked thing, she says. But the old man says that it is a very famous victory. And everybody praised the Duke, who this great fight did win. But what good came of it at last, quoth little Peterkin. Why, that I cannot tell, said he, but it was a famous victory. So Kaspar again continues that everybody praised the great Duke for winning this war. But what good came of it? What was the good result that came? That is what little Peterkin wants to know. But his grandfather is unable to give an answer. He says, it was a famous victory. This is what happens in all wars. It is usually one team of soldiers erase another team of soldiers and it is declared a victory for one side. But what actually happens, the real truth that happens is that so many children become fatherless, so many mothers will no longer see the sons they are waiting for at home. So many wives will never see their husbands come back home. So, this is what war is. War is evil. But it is always romanticized. And the very people who suffered the destruction, now we know that old Kaspar, he himself has suffered during this war. He says that his own father had to run away from a dwelling that was burned. But later on, people learn to talk about it in a conventional manner by saying that it was a great victory and these are things that we have to give up, we have to sacrifice. So many lives have to be sacrificed in order to win a great war. So Robert Sade, the poet, he is one of the Lake poets. The other two are William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge. He was also one of the Romantic poets, and he was a poet laureate from the year 1803 to until his death. He was a radical in the beginning of his poetic career. Later on, he became more conservative, conventional when he started respecting and believing in the institutions of England. But here we see that the poet questions the nature of war. So the poetic devices used in this poem, one is archaism, that is the use of words like nay, nay, quoth he. Then there is alliteration in the lines wonder waiting eyes. Then there is irony because it's very paradoxical that Kaspar keeps saying that it was a great victory, whereas all he has to say for the victory is that people were killed, plundered, wasted. So when you contrast the actual truth with what it is described in words, there is irony in the poem. Shocking sight, again alliteration, shocking sight. So here we see that war is always romanticized. History writes it as the victory of one over another, but it is here the poet wants to tell us that it is merely a degradation and sadness as far as humanity is concerned. Thank you.
After Blenheim by Robert Sade. It was a summer evening. Old Kaspar's work was done, and he before his cottage door was sitting in the sun, and by him spouted on the green his little grandchild Wilhelmine. She saw her brother Peterkin roll something large and round, which he beside the rivulet in playing there had found. He came to ask what he had found that was so large and smooth and round. Old Kaspar took it from the boy, who stood expectant by, and then the old man shook his head, and with a natural sigh, "'Tis some poor fellow's skull," said he, "who fell in the great victory. I find them in the garden, for there's many hereabout, and often when I go to plough, the ploughshare turns them out. For many thousand men," said he, "were slain in that great victory. Now tell us what it was all about." Young Peterkin he cries, and little Wilhelmine looks up with wonder-waiting eyes. "Now tell us all about the war, and what they fought each other for." "It was the English," Kaspar said, "who put the French to rout, but what they fought each other for, I could not well make out." But everybody said, quoth he, it was a famous victory. My father lived at Blenheim then, yon little stream hard by. They burnt his dwelling to the ground, and he was forced to fly. So with his wife and child he fled, nor had he where to rest his head. With fire and sword the country round was wasted far and wide, and many a childing mother then and newborn baby died. But things like that, you know, must be at every famous victory. They say it was a shocking sight after the field was won, for many thousand bodies here lay rotting in the sun. But things like that, you know, must be after a famous victory. Great praise the Duke of Marlborough won, and our good Prince Eugene. Why, 'twas a very wicked thing, said little Wilhelmine. Nay, nay, my little girl, quoth he, it was a famous victory. And everybody praised the Duke, who this great fight did win. But what good came of it at last, quoth little Peterkin. Why, that I cannot tell, said he, but it was a famous victory.